Okay, so you should all have just received a message to tell you that this session is being recorded. If you've joined us before, you'll know that we record all our sessions and then they are posted on our YouTube channel, where you can find all our previous sessions. And we know many people like to return to them to look at some parts again. And many people who aren't able to join us for the live sessions like to look at the sessions after they have been placed on YouTube. So please do look out later on this evening or tomorrow on Twitter. Anthony will be announcing that this session is now on YouTube for you to look at if you would wish. Okay, I think we're going to make a start. It's just gone 5 o'clock. So formally, I'd like to welcome you all here today. It's lovely to see so many people joining us. I know people are joining us all the time now as they're able to. Just a couple of reminders of things that we say every time. We would like you to keep your cameras off and to please mute during the main part of the session. This is to avoid us getting any echoey feedback, and also, of course, it's better for the environment if people are not all using their cameras. GeogLive team, of course, keep yours on as usual. This session is going to be recorded. We will post it on YouTube later today or tomorrow so that you can go back to it, or you can direct your friends and colleagues to it if they wish. So just to remind you that this is a session organised by the Early Years and Primary Committee of the Geographical Association. You can see our logo there. We organise these sessions once every half term, usually on a Wednesday, usually between 5 and 6 p.m. We have lots of people who come every time, which is fantastic, and we're always delighted to see new people arriving at our sessions. Can I just remind you about the polite reminder that was in the bottom left-hand corner of that screen, which is that we share these ideas freely with you, and you're very welcome to use them. That's exactly why we do these sessions, in order to spread ideas about good primary geography. But we would be grateful if you would acknowledge that these are the ideas of the speakers who are with us tonight. We would appreciate it if you would acknowledge that it's their work if you share it with anybody else. Okay, oh, hello, Joe, lovely to see you here. Just seen Joe, somebody I know from a relatively local school, to be joining. Right, I think we're ready to start. Please do use the chat. If you've not already signed in the chat by saying who you are and where you're joining us from, please do that. I can see quite a lot of you already have. If you haven't yet, now is the time to do that. So let me tell you about our schedule for today. You will have seen in our publicity that Fran Martin was due to join us today to talk about avoiding the single story when teaching about distant place. Unfortunately, Fran rang me earlier today to say that she's ill, and I could hear that she really was very poorly. So Fran is not able to be with us today, and she sends her apologies. But we have already agreed amongst the GeogLive team that we will reschedule her session, which looked extremely good. We've all seen the PowerPoints. We will reschedule it for next year. So we will come back to that, and we will be advertising that as one of our sessions for next year. However, we still have a really great session to offer you today. First of all, we have Sophie Brack and Lesley Burnett, who are talking about the questions you should ask yourself when you come to Teach Place. I believe, Sophie, that Lesley's not able to join us. Is that correct?
Yes, Lesley has an appointment tonight, so I'll be presenting on behalf of us both. Okay,
thank you very much. So Lesley too is sending her apologies, but we will be using her work, as Sophie says. Then we have Jen, another member of the GeogLive team, who is talking about a whole school approach to avoiding bias when teaching about places. And finally, we've got another member of the GeogLive team, Anthony, who is talking about teaching Egypt, but through a geographer's eyes. I'm sure many of you are very conscious that Egypt is a very common study in Key Stage 2 history, and Anthony thought it would be a great idea, which indeed it is, to think about what Egypt looks like through a geographer's eyes rather than through a historian's eyes. So that is our plan for the session. I'd like to hand over now to Steve, who is going to talk about the latest edition of Primary Geography, due out imminently, and also about some of the resources the GA has to support the teaching of place. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Julia. The latest edition of Primary Geographer will be out next week, all being well, so it will be available online, and hard copies will be coming through your letterbox during the next couple of weeks. It's a very timely topic. It's focusing on fresh geographies, and as you can see, there is quite a mix of articles there, all of which offer really fresh perspectives on a number of standard issues. As you can see, I think you'll all find the Edible School Gardens one particularly useful and exciting. In addition to the things that we've listed there, there is also a really fascinating article and a precursor really to our next GeogLive, in that we have an interview with Stephen Sterling on sustainability and transformative learning. So there's a really fascinating interview there from one of the leading lights in sustainability, and that will be the focus of our next GeogLive session. There's also some further thoughts on the PGQM, the Primary Geography Quality Mark, for those of you that are doing it, which we hope you'll find useful, and plenty of suggestions on how to bring excellent geography into the classroom. So all of those people, all of you that are members, you'll be receiving that fairly shortly. If you're not a member, I hope that you'll begin to think that maybe it's worth joining. Next slide, please, Anthony. And then just want to draw attention to the resources on place which the GA offers. And there are five main areas that we can perhaps just identify. The Leading Primary Geography Handbook has got quite a lot about place within it and is well worth looking at. The Everyday Guide to Primary Geography has a particular issue on locational geography. The In the Know and Super Schemes books also give you quite a very perceptive way of approaching studying place, and I think you'll find those incredibly useful. And of course, we can't leave without mentioning Barlow Bear. So plenty to support the wonderful ideas that you're going to get this afternoon within the GA shop. Please have a look at those. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed, Steve. That's great. And the GA does have a whole range of resources to support work teaching about place. Okay, I'm going to hand over to you now, Sophie, presenting on behalf of yourself and Lesley Burnett and Simone Anderson. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you. So this work is it's a further thought and consideration what we're presenting today based on an article which was published in the summer 22 edition of Primary Geography. So if you are interested and you are a member of Primary Geography, I would encourage you to log in, download the article and read more. As me presenting tonight, but as we've said, it's based on work which Lesley, Simone and I conducted together for this article. Next slide, please. So first of all, I think it's important whenever you're planning to teach about place, you begin to consider your own experiences and perspectives. Because if you don't begin to consider where you come from, you're not considering what biases you might bring when you teach about that place. So thinking about yourself, where you visited, what your experience are of that place is really important. Teaching about place is always going to be really challenging because every place is diverse, it's multi-layered, different people have different perspectives and opinions on that place, and different views and experiences on that place. And that includes you as a teacher, but it also includes the pupils in which you're teaching. Pupils will bring their own views, their own perspectives, their own experiences. And it could range from them being very limited in their knowledge about a place to them having lived there or grown up there. They may have been a tourist there. You might have lived there as a teacher, or you might never have actually visited that place. So there's so many different things to consider before you even start. Once you've considered all of that, next slide, please. I also think we were thinking when we were planning this, there's challenges which teachers need to be aware of. And we've used the word unintentionally in this because if you've not begun to consider your own experiences and your own perceptions of a place, these are the things which might happen. So challenges for teachers to be aware of. We might unintentionally plan or present information about place that would reinforce cultural stereotypes or biases related to that place. We might unintentionally focus on our own personal experiences about that place, forgetting about the perceptions and views of other people. So if we've been there as a tourist, we might focus on our views as a tourist rather than the perceptives of someone who might be living there. And that could include our own positive or negative experiences of different places. We might actually have limited perspectives on places, particularly places that we've not visited before. Where are we actually getting the information from to build our own perceptions of that place? And we might make assumptions or generalizations about a place which we're teaching on, which is not based on accurate information. It might be based on some misinformation or something we have read that is not actually true about that place. Next slide, please. So before planning or teaching about a place unit, there's a lot of things we might unintentionally be doing there. So what kind of questions can we be asking ourselves so we can plan for and begin to think about some of those things and avoiding those unintentional, almost like misrepresentations of place? First question is to ask yourself, what are your views and experiences of the place you are teaching? And then begin to think about what other people's views or experiences might be. Consider what views you're trying to portray, how you can ensure that they are balanced, and how you can avoid stereotypes. Try and open your mind and think, am I showing many different aspects and perspectives of this place? So am I showing a visitor? Am I showing someone who's lived there? Am I showing someone who's grown up there? And then how have you developed your understanding of that place? Is it your own personal experience? Is it through photos and videos? Is it through an internet search? How have you actually developed your own knowledge about that place? Next slide, please. So one place lots of us go to is we begin to look on the internet and we begin to look for images of a place. We might be choosing images that we've taken when we visit that place or when someone we know have visited that place. So the next question to really think about is, how are you choosing images or multimedia videos to showcase this place to the children that you are teaching? What images and multimedia have you gathered to teach about this place? Ask yourself, do these images show different perspectives of the location? Where have you sourced these images from? What perspective will these then be showing? If you look at your selection of images, consider how changing that selection might showcase the place in a different way. Is it going to change the picture that the children are going to be getting from that location? Do they convey to the children a fair representation of what the place is really like? And consider how you can find out. Begin to think, do other people in the community use that place differently? And are your images showing a full range of the people who might be in that place, thinking about ages, social class, gender, ethnicity, professional groups, service groups, the care sector? What are you actually showing there? And one thing I'm going to say is, remember that if you just type a place into Google, it's going to be selective. There's other places you can look at, Pixabay or Pixel Images, but there will still be bias in there. So if we turn to the next slide, I'm just going to show you the limitations of a Google search. So you can see here on the screen at the moment, here are the top images for a Google search for the Taj Mahal. You will notice that the angles and the perspectives are all very similar. They're all showing the same kind of angle looking over at the Taj Mahal. You can see like the water in the front, and you can see the front perspective of it. They all look quite glossy, images you might find in tourist brochures or things like that. If you just press enter, please, so then hopefully the top image will disappear. Perfect. Here are some images that I've chosen just because I wanted you to see 3 different images that I sourced by going beyond Google to show the Taj Mahal in a different way. We've got the one on the top left, which is from Lonely Planet. It's kind of showing that tourist brochure type of view. Then we've got the bottom left, which is from India Today, from a article entitled "Is a Crush of Tourists Endangering the Taj Mahal?" And on the right, that image came from Twitter, from a 10-year-old activist, and she was highlighting the problem of plastic pollution at the Taj Mahal. So here, hopefully you can see how selecting these different images will give the pupils a very different perspective and experience all of the same place. Another thing to consider is the importance of sharing the sources of the photographs, and how does revealing, me telling you where those photographs came from, how would that help both you and the pupils understand what those different perspectives are from these different people, and asking questions about what they're seeing, and sometimes actually even showing the children could be really interesting, so they understand the limitations of a Google search as well. If you search for something on Google, you're going to be seeing the top images, not necessarily the whole range of images. Next slide, please. So then we were thinking next, we were beginning to think, how can we start a topic with an open mind, and begin to think about how we can get children to begin to become critical consumers of multimedia, critical consumers of images, and begin to think about place and understanding that there are many layers to the different places that we are studying. So here is just one activity that both myself and Lesley have used with our classes when we're introducing a topic about a new place. So you would split the class in two, tell the pupils that you are giving them images which will represent their new place of study. You could then give different images to one half of your class to the other half of your class, but don't let them know. For example, you might give rural images to one and urban images to another, or images showing rich areas to one and more poverty to the other. So you can kind of choose what you want to do with your images. They have 10 minutes to look at their images. They can draw conclusions about the location, and then they give their feedback to the other half of the class. But at this point, they've not seen the images which they've got. So then they can understand that actually we're looking at the same place, but we have really got different views depending on the images that we've seen. You could give half the class a selection of images from the country to study, and the other half, so you could do rural, urban, tourist, local life, industrial, agricultural. There's so many ways you could split this and get those differing discussions about what the perceptions are. After their presentations, you can tell them this is actually the same country, it's just different aspects of it, demonstrating that what you are shown in an image will inform your view of a place. And actually, are you seeing all different images of the place? Why has the photographer taken that photograph? And then if you've shown them the range of images, if you've not told them what the country is, they could then begin to use their geographical knowledge about all the images they've seen and begin to guess the location of study. So that's just a really nice way to start a topic in a way that's going to get children to understand that there are already many different perspectives to the place that they're studying. I've spoken a lot about how children need to think carefully about the images that are being taken. When a photographer is taking an image, they've always got something they want. They want to make the photograph interesting. So they pick an angle, they pick a view. So how can you use the images, multimedia that you've gathered to encourage pupils to understand the limitations of photographs and begin to become more of a critical consumer of photographs? And I've just got one little example here. This is a place very close to where I live. So you could show the children a photograph of a place taken from a particular angle or perspective and just ask them for the views on this location. So at the moment, this is a petrol station in the snow. If you press enter, this image will fade. This is exactly the same location. All I've done is a 180-degree turn. So it's exactly the same space, just a different angle. And then you could say to them, oh, what do you think of the location now? How have your views changed? Which image do you think a photographer would rather take? But it is actually exactly the same space. We've just done a 180-degree turn. Next slide, please. This next activity is thinking about chopping parts of a photograph off. The one on the left has been around since 2003, so it's worth checking your images are up to date. But this well-known image of Brazil, the place still exists. You can find it on Google Maps, and I was going to get the coordinates for it and share with you, but I've forgotten to do that. But if anyone wants the coordinates, just ask, and you can go to it on Google View and see it. What you would do here is you would give them one half of the image, so you can see a child's work on the screen, and the child draws the other half of the photograph. I'm hoping that if you press, did I show? No, I haven't got the other half of the photograph. I thought it was on there, but I think my screens have gone a little bit wrong. But the other half of the photograph actually shows the favela. And then the children will think, oh, I thought it was all going to be, so all the children I've ever had have drawn like beaches and stuff next to it because they're seeing this lovely building, and actually there's a favela on the other side of it. There's this really great website called Unequal Scenes. So if you look on the other side of the page, we've got this image that I have cropped off, and again, one side we've got this lovely green area. And if you remove the other side of the photograph, and again, I think my screens have gone a little bit wrong where I've tried to animate them, it is a more densely populated area. So it just begins to challenge the children into thinking, what might be missing in this photograph? What am I presuming is going to be there? What is actually there? But Unequal Scenes is an absolutely fantastic website for looking for images of different locations which show this contrast. Next slide, please. And then at the end, you could begin to think about how you're going to assess. So again, starting moments for kind of that assessing, what do your pupils already know? We feel it's vital to have an idea of the pupils' views before starting, so you know if your lessons will have any impact. One really quick activity that Lesley has recommended is you give them, after you've done some activities, you might give them the location, and they could write 5 words or sentences that sum up their views. They could be both positive or negative. It could be that they have lots of knowledge about that place, or actually they don't have a lot to say about that place initially. And then at the end, you can repeat that 5-word task and see if they've changed their perceptions or their thoughts about a place. Okay. I think that should be the end. If anyone wants the complete photos from the previous slide, just message in the chat and I will get them to you, because unfortunately my animations went a little bit wrong there. So message in the chat and I will send you those photographs out, but they are all available on the Unequal Scenes website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie. That's absolutely fantastic. Your animations may have gone wrong, but everything else was absolutely perfect and very insightful. Thank you. So Sophie's reminded us of the importance not only of thinking about our own knowledge and perceptions of the places we're going to teach, but also checking out the children's knowledge and perception, and of course about thinking of the images we use. Geography is a very visual subject, and it's a great subject for developing visual literacy, helping children to see that one photograph doesn't tell the full picture. All photographs are taken, or all media is taken from by somebody for some particular purpose, often with an audience in mind, or sometimes with a particular purpose in mind, and helping children to see how the range of resources we use with them won't necessarily tell the whole picture, and may indeed tell quite a biased picture if we're not careful, is a really great message. Thank you very much indeed, Sophie, for leading us through that. Jen, I'm going to hand over to you now to present this work from St George's Cathedral Primary School on a whole school approach to avoiding bias.
Thank you. I should just start by saying this is not my school. It's my friend's school. She's the head teacher, and through being friends with the local crazy geography lady, me, we've had many a discussion over a glass of wine in the pub about topics like this. And quite interestingly, she's then taken on a whole school approach to ensure that they are avoiding the bias when teaching about place. I think it's a really interesting approach. It's a good way to get your whole school involved. And so she's put together these slides. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it today because she's got full governors, you know, head teachers, very busy people. So hopefully I do her ideas justice. So if we could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So they wanted to make sure that their actual geography curriculum and their wider curriculum matched the cultural diversity of their wider community and London. So it's a school quite central to London, near Elephant and Castle, I think. Ooh, please don't shoot me if I got that wrong. There are currently 104 EAL children across the school. 55 of these children, so 31%, speak no English at home at all. There are 18 different languages spoken. So it's a very, very diverse school, but not a huge school either. So very diverse, very easy to see that diversity. They want children to learn about all aspects of other parts of the world and avoid teaching that unconscious bias that Sophie's just been talking about. Again, they wanted it to be meaningful, so adding a layer to their curriculum. It's not just a day, a week, or a month, but it's built into the academic year throughout the year with links across the curriculum, and they can build on it then each year as well. So each class, each year group has their own focus continent. They explore different places within this continent, and they're discovering similarities and differences across the continent and with the UK. I know before they've tried, this term we're all going to go north on our continent, this term we're all going to go south. So that's one way you can help your teachers do it. And children are given, like it says, the opportunity to travel the continent over the year, finding out about many different locations, as well as also asking their own questions linked to this area of the world. So a real, really well thought out way. And as it says there, it's not just a day, it's not just a week, it's throughout the whole school year. And each class can kind of really take ownership of that continent and studying that continent, because they know they've got it for the whole year. Next slide, please. Thank you. So it was planned to be a way of really teaching the children, and again, they're children who might not have the opportunity to go on a plane or see other parts of the world. They really want to show them what the world outside London looks like, but also this enables them then to have an appreciation for any culture that they come into contact with, and you're really teaching that respect of the diversity and really celebrating it, rather than it being something new or different or scary to some people. So again, a lovely ethos that's built into the whole school. Next slide, please. So you've got on the right hand side there the continent and the year group. So EYFS do Antarctica, year 1 do Australasia, year 2 do South America, 3 North America, year 4 do Asia, year 5 do Africa, and year 6 do Europe. And then within that, some countries they look at. You can see there's a huge selection. Gosh, I forgot my words then, sorry. A huge selection of different countries within each continent as well. And some key themes they look at, they do the geographical, so looking at landscapes, population, rural, urban landmarks, doing map work, doing climate, but they also look at cultural focus, so the religion or the language, and food, because one of the first ways we often learn about other cultures is through their food. We've all gone down for a Chinese, we've all tried the different foods, the animals that live there, different traditions, and their children can really share their own traditions, and really just get their own ownership on the topic, different festivals, looking at comparisons of rich versus poor, looking at migration and trading and trade links as well, are just some of the key ideas that are covered in most of the continents where appropriate to the year group, obviously. So I think now in the next few slides, we've got some examples of some of the work. So if we have a look at the next slide, yes, we do. So this is EYFS. And here you can see they do the story of the night iceberg, they do some artwork, they do some looking at packing, what you would pack for the weather, so they're getting into the weather and things like that. They do a little bit of artwork, some tough tray work, some discussions, lots of different ways there to get meaningful learning about the continent, as well as covering the national curriculum, because that is always a battle in school, is it not, to get everything covered. But no links are tenuous. They are well thought through links. They are meaningful links that are giving adding value to the children's learning. You're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. If we have a look at the next slide, we've got year 1, and here we can see they're doing Australasia. So you've got some Maori traditions, you've got some map work in New Zealand, you've got Captain Cook's journey. They did some writing, a persuasive letter for coming to visit. You're looking at animals. So again, lots of different, it's not just, here's Australia. You know, they do cover New Zealand as well, which is always a big New Zealand. I do have friends from New Zealand as well, and they do feel very marginalised when they get left out of things. And, you know, not just here's a map of Australia, isn't it a bit hot? Here's a cool animal. I think one of them was the environmental challenges of Tasmania, the bottom right hand there. So really looking into current day issues that are happening within those countries as well. And then next slide, please. So in year 2, they have been looking at South America, was that? Yes. Here they do some of their own research about the country. They look into deforestation, they look into map work, landmarks, and some more traditional, and there you can see some traditional dress. Here, Louise was saying that the children really enjoy doing the research because they get to find out about things that they want to know about that country. So one child, you know, they have the scaffold there, but then if a child really wants to go and look at the food, they can go off and do the food, whereas someone else might want to look more at what animals live there. And so they can take that little bit of ownership as well and come back and do a bit of contrasting and comparing. Next slide, please. So in year 3, this is where they're looking at North America, and I love the fact that they do Canada, because how often do we actually just look at the United States of America? So they do look there, they do a bit more of a history, looking at the presidents, learning some facts about the 50 states, and also looking at their perceptions. Is that mind map there? But then they look into Canada, the climate, and they're looking at gun control as well, and different facts, and actually a map of Canada and looking at the provinces, and you know how many people actually learn that, you know, we all know America, United States of America I should say, is split up into states, but actually, you know, Canada's split up into provinces, just like the UK is counties. And then the next slide, please. So in year 4 they are looking at Asia. And here we can see we've got climate zones of India. So again, they're looking at the climate zones in different places. They're relating this to the globe. So they can see, I know there's tropical here because where it is on the globe. This is obviously, we looked at colder climates in EYFS in year 1, and doing that contrast and compare as the year goes on. They look at China, mapping of China, and some interesting facts. And I really like the, on top left is a map of the landmarks of Turkey. Yes. So again, different types of mapping as well there. So not just here's an outline of a map and put it on, but they're doing their own almost conceptual map of the different landmarks, and some contrasting and comparing, sorry. And then in year 5, what I found really interesting with year 5 was they chose different people to look at from Africa, different important people, and not necessarily maybe the people we might look at with our maybe UK bias. I loved the looking at the different, hold on, let me just double check. I don't want to get this wrong because it's really small on my screen there. But if you look at the bottom right, the jigsaw, it is to research the lives of individuals living in Ghana. So they're looking at different people that live in Ghana. And they've got a tourist brochure there, with some lovely elephants in, looking at different flags, different countries in Africa, really getting that idea across that it is actually a continent and not a country. And then the next slide. So finally, in year 6, we are looking at Europe. And there you can clearly see the artwork that they've got linked to it. What I thought was a fantastic idea, and I might be stealing myself, is the economy and education of the Netherlands. So looking at the structure of the economy and education of the Netherlands, because actually, do we really look at how we how our schooling compares to other people's. We've got the map of Italy. They've done some extended writing, and the map, rather than it being a map of Europe, they've done a map of the languages. So if you look the third one across, it's basic phrases, and they've mapped that out in different countries, which I thought was actually quite a nice way of putting a bit of geography into your languages maybe as well. But, you know, not just the normal, here's a map of Europe, let's, you know, learn where the countries are. Actually, why don't we learn some standard greetings? You've got some fact files as well. So you can see lots of lovely cross-curricular links, some meaningful geography as well. And they do make sure, you know, if it's geography, they make sure the children know it's geography. But the whole school approach means that, you know, as your geography leader, your head teacher, that they're getting that well thought out teaching throughout the whole school. Everyone's on the same page with how you're thinking about it, thinking about avoiding the bias and the single story. And the children also study the whole world before they leave your school as well. And it's not just a token day, it is built meaningfully into the curriculum. So I hope I didn't say anything wrong there and I didn't do them a disservice, but I think it's a wonderful project that they've done at their school, and I know the children and staff both really, really enjoy teaching it. So yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie. Sorry, thank you, Jen, very much indeed. That's fantastic. It's really hard to present work from another school, I know, but you've done a brilliant job. You've given us a great overview of how the whole project works, and then lots and lots of examples from across the entire age range. Lots of ideas for people to pick up there, just as there was in Sophie's presentation. Thank you, Jen, very much indeed. That's just great. Anthony, we now come to you, looking at Egypt through a geographer's eye rather than the historian's eye, which is so common in primary schools.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Nice to be with you. Anthony Barlow from the University of Roehampton, and I'm going to be speaking to you about something that our student teachers often come to us with, this query in question, the fact that they are teaching about ancient Egypt. They're teaching about the images that you can see on the screen, and they've been told, they've been advised to make those sorts of cross-curricular links that Jen's just been talking about, and they are not quite sure what to do, which always makes me question the geography we've actually taught them. So really, this is really a working out for me to support our student teachers, to support you, of some perspectives that I can think of from resources I use in many different contexts, of how you can really build a sense of place, a sense of geography, a sense of similarity as well as difference, and this idea that geography is a very distinct and separate subject to the historical perspective, because you often probably think of Egypt, if you are asked to just pause and momentarily think of Egypt, as the image you can see there, but the image that you can see there still has in the background that encroaching, that massive city of Cairo. So the humans and these human constructs, these pyramids, these spaces in the desert, are really interconnected. There is a connection between the people today and the people 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. Because if we see the other images, and this has been shared already in Sophie's insightful presentation, if we see these images from different perspectives, if we see them from different views, from above, from an oblique view, from the side, we can see that there's a lot of human constructs nearby. There's clearly places for tourists, there's clearly hotels, there's all sorts of vistas that you can view these from, including, as was mentioned in the chat earlier on, very perceptively preempting this slide, there are lots of images of KFC and the view from KFC and the pyramids and Pizza Hut and so on. So again, just reinforcing Sophie's perspective earlier on. So if you were planning 6 lessons on Egypt, here are some thoughts from my perspective of what my student teachers, or what you might do to bring out the geography through a study of this country of 107 million people. It's worth having that kind of figure in your head as you kind of start this thought process. So where is Egypt and where is it near? I'm going to show you some maps. That's always a great place to start when you're planning the curriculum. Where is Egypt and where is it near? So how is Egypt connected to the world? Where do people live today in Egypt, and why do they live there? And I'm going to look at a particular example there, as you can see in the final bullet point, of Siwa, somewhere you've possibly never heard of, which is an urban oasis, which when I did a bit of digging was a really quite interesting contrast to Cairo and contrast to places in this country. So what will you find on the land in Egypt today, given that it's 95% desert? Where might you buy something if you went to this capital of Cairo? But what is life like for people in Egypt today, the average person today, the average child today, and how is it different, and how is it similar to the locations that you might find yourselves in? So as I say, starting with a map is always really helpful, and this is Digimap for Schools. It may be a tool that you use already, but this is just one of the overlays that you can get, where you can see there in brown the different landscapes, the desert, certainly in North Africa, but then this green corridor, which clearly, as you will imagine, is the Nile. This is the fertile land. This is where people are living. This is where people are growing things. So the way that Digimap describes this is flooded grassland and savanna. And you can see this is a population overlay in Digimap as well, really useful, again, to see people are living where it's wet, people are living where there's things to buy, people are clustering together in this particular nation, in a very different pattern to the pattern that you might see in other countries. And you might see certainly in the UK. Have you ever seen a population distribution map of the UK? And what does that suggest about where people live and what they cluster around and who they cluster around? So there are all sorts of other maps that you can find within Digimap and elsewhere to kind of show the locations and show the different place knowledge that you want to try and build up. Some nice descriptions online, and it's really good to get children to use a wider range of language to describe different locations. I came across this, that Egypt is a transcontinental country, and it spans the northeast corner of Africa and the southwest corner of Asia by this land bridge, which is formed by the Sinai Peninsula. So there might be some thinking that you want to do about that, some thinking around that particular language and what that means to you. Do you know what a peninsula is? Do the children know what a peninsula is? But Egypt, essentially, North Africa, is a Mediterranean country. We've got Israel to the northeast, we've got the Gulf of Aqaba and the Red Sea to the east, we've got Sudan to the south, very much in the news, so we could be bringing that into this particular study. And then we've got Libya off to the west, and that's from the website that I'll come back to called Map Fight. But we've also got this regional perspective. We need to kind of zoom out when we're starting these studies of specific countries and say, well, what's Egypt next to? What's north and south and east and west? And you can see some of the nations there. And we also need to talk about the landscapes of these different places as well. And this was from a really powerful book that I was scanning through called Water on Sand, which is essentially describing Egypt and the Middle East. And it says that much of the region is arid, dry or semi-arid, but is still home to a wide variety of different landscapes and ecologies. Plains in Turkey, Iran and Syria, mountain ranges in Morocco. Google Toubkal if you've never heard of that, in Morocco, the highest mountain in the Atlas Mountains, highest mountain in the north of the continent of Africa. We've got fertile river deltas in Iraq and Egypt, but then we've still got thick forests in Turkey and Lebanon and Iran. So these are very close places to each other, but they have a whole story there that's very different and contrasting to Egypt, and clearly contrasting to ours, because Cairo itself, that capital city, is at 30 degrees north of the equator and 31 degrees east of the prime meridian. So we need to always put that into context, don't we, and think, well, I'm in London, so I'm 52 degrees north or so, and I'm about on the prime meridian. Where are you? Can you have that knowledge that you can just trip off your tongue? Do the children know that? Because that will start to tell a story of landscape and start to tell a story of the physical geography that you can find there. So Egypt is quite a nice round number. It's 1 million square kilometers. Do you know how many square kilometers the UK is? I'll show you in a minute. But it's essentially 4 times bigger than the UK. And the CIA World Factbook, that I quite like as a ready reckoner place to go to just to get some general factual information about locations, tells us these things about the climate, desert in Egypt, hot, dry summers with moderate winters, that they grow these sorts of products, exporting some of them, but obviously mainly feeding their 107 million people. And they're exporting some of these other things like petroleum and natural gas and fertilizer and gold. But then we need to do the contrast, don't we? So we've got the UK, which clearly further north from the equator is temperate. We have these winds that we get from the North Atlantic and the whole story of the climate of the UK that we could tell. I love that fact that the CIA World Factbook has that 50% of our days are overcast, not something that you find in Egypt. So quite a nice contrast there. But again, some of the things that we grow, think about what we export underneath, but think about what we're importing as well. And we'll come back to the importing story as well, because wherever we're talking about, that import-export story of trade is really quite important. And again, this is the Map Fight app, which is really quite useful to compare and contrast that Egypt in pink and the UK in purple there. A great article if you got access to teaching geography through the Geographical Association from summer 2011 from somebody called Claire Kennedy. She was doing some research with her Key Stage 3 children, in effect seeing what her children had brought from the teaching that we're doing in early years and primary. And she was doing this inquiry question where she was asking, Egypt, a rising star? You decide, from the research that she was carrying out. And essentially, she was trying to move them away from this idea of Egypt being an ancient treasure house, this alluring destination. It is that for tourists, but it's also a nation in its own right with distinctive culture and territory. Those touristic stereotypes of Egypt are problematic and do obscure some of the contemporary realities, because actually there's high levels of social economic inequality there. There are challenges, there are problems, just like there are in other nations. So this was the initial through the window view that her children had, that has perhaps come from primary, because we never do the contrast of that's the ancient, here's the modern. And certainly she found out that really it was 50% of the drawings really had this sort of impact, didn't really cover anything other than poverty in Egypt, tourism in Egypt, something to do with it being an Arabic country and people 90% being Islamic and in their faith, and the idea that actually Egypt is a dangerous place. They gave that sense as well from her particular research, and none of them really referenced the colonial past, which is worth us considering and bearing in mind. So just to build on some of those questions that I set out at the beginning in terms of connections to the world, I love these sites that you can find online that show the live air traffic, but also the live shipping traffic. And this shows the importance of that vital canal, the Suez Canal, that is part of this kind of east-west perspective that you get from somewhere like Egypt. And if you've never watched the BBC documentary Why Ships Crash, about the Ever Given that crashed in 2021 during the pandemic and blocked this canal, it's really well worth using YouTube to find that really insightful documentary about understanding trade, how we get so many of our things through that narrow path, that narrow peninsula, through the Suez Canal, through the Mediterranean, and then to the ports that we have. Things that we get at Christmas, things that we use every day that are shipped from China and elsewhere, they're coming through that narrow canal. Really, really vital to consider that as part of the study of Egypt. If you don't know, weatherspark.com, a super website for looking at weather data. Again, I'm doing a compare and contrast here with London in terms of the high temperatures and the low temperatures. So a real clear difference there between being at 52 degrees north and having that comparison with somewhere which is in North Africa, which is desertified, which is only really coming to life because of that essential Nile River. I love this particular graphic that you can find on WeatherSpark as well, which really does provoke a lot of conversation when you actually get your head around it. So this is the weather of Egypt as an average throughout a whole year. And you can see that there are some months there, you can see the months along the bottom, which are really quite uncomfortable. Certainly there would be for me, maybe not to people who are used to them, but there are cooler times as well. So questions like, when would you choose to go on holiday? Which month would you choose to go? What time of the day as well? That's what's going up the sides. Really, really insightful. So you could ask a question to the children. It's February midnight. What's the weather going to be like? Are you going to be comfortable sleeping? If it's September at midday, what's the weather like? So lots of data like this, and historical data as well, if you're looking at a particular event, that's really useful to look at. And then the comparison to London is amazing. This is the comparison. This is the sort of weather that we have as an average. And that's always useful to point out. An average doesn't always show the whole story or the story of change. This is London last year. If any of you were anywhere in the UK where we suffered those 35, 40-degree heats, there's a conversation there about averages compared to the specific year story, and perhaps where we're headed in the future, where it's going to be perhaps more like this through the next few decades. So I mentioned everyday life, really, really vital, really important for people to consider, for you to consider. This might be the everyday life of a child, an adult, a family in the centre of Cairo. If you've not come across it, the Getminder project, Dollar Street, this is the example. Family in Egypt, talks about their monthly income. It talks about the sorts of food. It shows their washing up system. It shows how they brush their hair, little animated videos of street view, their clothing, smiling faces. There's the human face of Egypt. We need to get this across to children. Sadly, at the moment, only one example from Egypt of a family, but such a lot to think about, similarity and difference of maybe a group of people that live in those flats, or maybe an apartment in place in Egypt, but a range of views. And this is Cairo as well. It's not far from the pyramids, but this is Cairo. Can you see the McDonald's? Can you see the busy streets? So it's this range of images that, again, you can find online, again, considering the perspective, again, considering rich and poor and diverse perspectives that we need to try and get across to the children wherever possible. Nice examples of markets, buying and selling. This is a several kilometre market. Cairo's Friday market, apparently very synonymous with the city. It's something that the British Museum have looked into, trying collecting something that's synonymous with this particular market, to try and collect some modern day artifacts that could go alongside some of their historic artifacts. So a nice link on the British Museum website if you look for it. And they chose, when they went to the Cairo market, a minty green sewing machine. It's a really interesting page. So if you go in the British Museum at the moment, you get these kind of historic 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 year old artifacts carved out of stone, and then you get a typewriter, you get a mint green sewing machine, which also tells the story of Egypt, but a more modern day story as well. So worth looking into that kind of modern Egypt project from the British Museum. So just to kind of finish off, I just want to focus on somewhere that's not Cairo, somewhere that's not the Nile, not the Aswan Dam, which is where I studied at sixth form. I remember that very, very well. I'm not sure what I took from it. It certainly wasn't the pyramids view of Egypt, but I want to just focus on Siwa, this oasis. And you may not have a view of what an oasis is or a sense of what this is. So this is the Google view of the Siwa oasis. You can see there from above. So it's quite a settled place. It's been settled for thousands of years, but it's what's called an urban oasis. And what an oasis is in this perspective, it's somewhere that's below the sea level. So it's at the level of the water table. It's where the fresh water is. And this is 19 meters below sea level. It was very isolated. You can see from the first image there, before the roads came, this really was a place of very, very few people. It was quite a settled place. It wasn't a place that people would visit. But now, of course, it's changing. Tourism's coming. They're trying to build it up and develop it. And there's a worry that this water could actually run out. This is a non-renewable resource. It's not being regularly topped up. There's still not much rainfall. So you need to tell the whole physical geography of these oases and how they come to be. But there are hot springs there. There's date palm cultivation. There's olives that are growing there. But there are these new encroaching things, these hotels, these spas, and salt that's exported from there as well, and Salt Lake. So, and again, just some images there from Wikipedia that show the kind of wider perspective of this Siwa location there. Nature is important in Egypt. It's not just all kind of desolate deserts. This is from National Geographic, some really good, clear explanations on the National Geographic site I found, which were really helpful. That kind of link the kind of past, the carvings, the connection that the ancient Egyptians had with nature, and the modern day. There's lots of protected regions which include these oases, and these are just some from an ecotourism website that could be worth looking into if you wanted to teach about this to a group of children. Some really interesting historic sites which have now these developments where tourists come, some places to dive, some places to see interesting geology, Crystal Mountain in the White Desert. So some other perspectives that you could show that really do contrast, show a different story to the historical, but also to the single story of Egypt that we might actually have. So those are my 6 lessons. All those images could be used in some of those lessons in various parts, but I'd be interested if any of you could use those, or have any other ideas that you could put into the chat. What I haven't talked about, and I'm just going to flick these on the screen very, very quickly, is the kind of key subject knowledge that through a unit like this, I would actually want children to know. So I'll just leave this on the screen just as I finish. Again, I'm using multiple sources, BBC, National Geographic, try and get some of this information online, as well as some of those touristic videos. I've not shown any moving images, time-lapse images, hyperlapse images are really useful videos that you can find on Vimeo or YouTube as well, but we haven't got time to look into those. So I hope that was useful. Do put any comments or questions in the chat, and I'll hand back to Julia.
Thank you, Anthony. That was absolutely fantastic. What struck me above all else was what a fantastic range of resources you'd found that would be accessible to any teacher wanting to find out much more about modern life in Egypt and the geography of modern Egypt. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. And indeed, thank you to all our contributors today. As it happens today, all of them are members of the GeogLive team. So thank you very much indeed, Steve, for talking to us about the GA and primary geographer, to Sophie for talking about your work, to Jen for talking about the work from another school, which is quite hard, and Anthony for your work too. Thank you all very much indeed. I'm not certain if there are any questions, but I'll ask the GeogLive team to have a look and see whether there are any. And in the meantime, I'll talk to you about National Fieldwork Fortnight. National Fieldwork Week happened last year. It was a great success, particularly in primary schools, and we're hoping for similar success this year. The dates this year are the 26th of June to 7th of July. One of the feedback pieces of feedback we had from people was that they would like to have longer. So this is a fortnight in which everybody is encouraged to do fieldwork. It is an initiative from the Geographical Association, but I'm really pleased to tell you that absolutely everybody can join in. Your school does not have to be a member of the Geographical Association, neither do you individually as a teacher. Instead, if you go to that website that's currently on the screen, can I ask somebody to put that in the chat, please, so people could access it? If you go to this website, you'll find lots of information about National Fieldwork Fortnight. The theme this year is environment, which is absolutely perfect for primary children of all ages. On the website, you'll find lots of ideas for work across the age range. There are resources there. There's lots of suggestions for good practice and guidance around things like risk assessment when you're doing fieldwork. And there are also freely downloadable certificates that you can award to every child that takes part in National Fieldwork Fortnight, and that you can place on your school wall as evidence that the school has taken part in National Fieldwork Fortnight. So if you didn't know about National Fieldwork Fortnight, I'd really recommend you go to that website, have a look at the resources there. There's also a brief presentation that you can download that you could share with your colleagues. So that's National Fieldwork Fortnight. Are there any questions or comments that we need to go back to GeogLive team?
I've seen a question on the chat for me. Someone was asking about, after we look at the images from unequal scenes, I've just put the website into the chat. What do we talk about with the children? So the children usually, as if we think about the Brazil one, they've drawn that image and they've continued and they draw beaches and all this stuff, and then they get shown the favela, and we just talk about why they thought that the image was going to be that way, what has surprised them. And with a lot of it, we then go on to having a little discussion about inequality and how there are rich people and poor people in every place, and remind them that even though I mean, I teach in St Albans and it's a relatively wealthy part of the world, but reminding them there is poverty in the UK as well, and that just because we are looking at a distant place, which sometimes a lot of people might see as a poorer country, that does not mean that there is not rich parts of that city and poorer parts of that city, just like there are richer parts of our country and poorer parts of our country. So we go into those kinds of discussions after looking at the images.
That's great, Sophie. Thank you very much. I'm sure people will go to that website and look at it. Is there any other questions that anybody spotted that we could answer at the moment?
Jen has answered a question in the chat if you want to see that.
Oh, Jen, do you want to?
Yeah, someone was just asking if that's the only geography they teach. It's not. And I know that then makes you go, oh my God, how do they fit everything in? Because it makes me do the same thing. Where it's a clear geography objective, they teach it as their geography as part of the national curriculum, try and fit it in that way. So say if you're looking at climate zones or weather, they would do it about somewhere in their continent. However, you can get it in cross-curricular as well. So some persuasive writing writing would be in literacy, but it, like they did the persuasive leaflet to come to Australia. So they fit it in. If it's pure geographical knowledge skill that they're wanting to get, it's a specific geography lesson that ties in with their curriculum. If it's less, you know, they're using the knowledge to apply it in a different way, like a persuasive leaflet, they will focus on the objective or subject that they want to produce. Oh, my train of thought just went, but I think hopefully that made sense. So, you know, if it's a leaflet, it would be a literacy objective, but using the geography knowledge. There we go. Sorry.
That was perfect, Jen. That's great. Thank you. And I'm sure that's a question that a lot of people had in their mind when they were listening to your presentation. So it's great that you've clarified that there is geography as well as that continental theme for each class. Okay, it's got a couple of minutes to go. Unless there's anything else, I can't see any GeogLive people waving at me, so I'll assume we're all right. Right, in that case, I'd just tell you briefly about, well, in fact, I'm going to ask Steve to tell us briefly about GeogLive 15, because he is going to be speaking at it. Steve.
Sorry, Judy. The next GeogLive will be about climate change and sustainability education. Stephen Scoffman and myself will try and put some perspective on how sustainability may be introduced into the primary curriculum. And then we've got some of our experts from the GeogLive team again, bringing up some wonderful ideas about how that can actually be put into practice in the primary school.
That's great, Steve. Thank you very much indeed. I see it's very nearly 6 o'clock. Could we have the next slide, please, Anthony?
There aren't any more slides, Julia, I don't believe, unless I've missed one.
I've got one on my printout, not to worry. Oh, well, we'll leave it there. Anyway, thank you very much indeed, everybody, for coming. Thank you very much indeed to everybody who's contributed. Thank you for putting things in the chat. I can see lots and lots of people in the chat are thanking the team. I'd like to thank the team again as well. You've done a fantastic job as always. It's lovely to see so many of you on the screen. Do put your camera on now if you'd like to, just to see so that we can see everybody. Thank you all very much for coming. I hope you all have a lovely half term the week after next, and we look forward to seeing you on the 26th, no, not the 26th, the 21st of June, when we'll be talking about climate and sustainability education. Okay, thank you all very much indeed for coming, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Julia.